Hello and welcome to our Stone Beats. Hello, my friends. Hello, my neighbors. Hello, my fellow citizens of this great country, and hello, my neighbors near and far. Greetings to Americans here at home and Americans overseas. Tonight, I would like to talk about something that is on everyone's mind, apparently: the freedom of speech. Now, honestly, I don't know how we got to this point. I don't know how we got to the point where there's even a discussion about freedom of speech. According to the Bill of Rights, it's an inalienable right given to all, whether you're a citizen of this country or you're not. You have the right to make your voice heard. You have a right to express your opinions. And I would like to quote the First Amendment from the whitehouse.gov. And I quote: "The First Amendment provides that Congress make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting its free exercise. It protects freedom of speech, the press, assembly, and the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances." It does not say that all speech except for hate speech is okay. It does not say that the hate speech or the hate word of the week is A, B, C, D, E, or F. It provides a institutional amendment, a institutional right for a person to say, I do not agree with my government. I do not agree with the person currently in the White House or its ruling Senate or Congress. I do not agree with the Supreme Court Justice ruling or Supreme Court Justice. It provides a person with the right to express themselves. And apparently, there are certain people in power who feel that not all Americans should be granted this equally. They feel that because you may speak out against them, you may make fun of them, they feel that they have a right to send the strong arm of the government after you. And that is not in the First Amendment. I say again, the First Amendment provides that Congress make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting its free exercise. It protects freedom of speech, the press, assembly, and the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, there are people who got this, who we refer to as great authors, great thinkers, people who were not even part of this country, who knew what this freedom of speech meant. And I would like to quote them from Henry Louis Gates. "Censorship is to art as lynching is to justice." Frank Sonnenberg: "You win a debate with a better argument, not by force." George Orwell: If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Chris Jammy. Sometimes a people lose their right to remain silent when pressured to remain silent. Evelyn Beatrice Hall. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Oscar Wilde. I may not agree with you, but I will defend to death your right to make an ass of yourself. John Milton. Give me liberty to know, to utter, and to argue freely according to consciousness above all liberties. E.A. It's not unpatriotic to denounce an injustice committed on our behalf. Perhaps it is the most patriotic thing we can do. Edward Snowden, ultimately saying that you don't care about your privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about freedom of speech because you have nothing to say. Now, let me pause right there. I do not agree with Edward Snowden on some of the things he has done, nor has he said, but he does have a point here. I will give him that. And lastly, William O. Douglas. Restriction of free thought and free speech is the most dangerous of all subversions. It is the one un-American act that could most easily defeat us. Now, the one thing that all rulers, elected or not elected, fear, in my opinion, is the freedom of speech, the freedom of thought, the freedom of expression. Nazi Germany knew this. From 1933 to 1945, Germany, Nazi Germany, carried out a campaign to cleanse German society of individuals viewed as biological threats to the nation's health. Enlisting the help of physicians and medically trained geneticists, psychiatrists, and anthropologists, the Nazis developed racial health policies that began with mass sterilization of genetically diseased persons and ended with the near annihilation of European Jewry. With the patina of legitimacy provided by racial science experiment experts, the Nazi regime carried out a program of approximately 400,000 forced sterilizations and 275 euthanasia deaths that found its most radical manifestation in the death of millions of racial enemies in the Holocaust. Now, some of you may be asking, why am I even bringing up the Holocaust? What does the extermination of Jews have to do with freedom of speech? If you do not know, I encourage you to read up on the history of the Nazis in Germany. I encourage you to read up on their political murders, their political thoughts of freedom of speech. I encourage you to read up on them, to enlighten yourself, to educate yourself, so that when someone says, I do not agree that Twitter user Flutterby Deer Rainbow Wolf 92, who is confused about their gender and their healthy state of mind, goes on a rampage because someone says, I do not agree with you, and starts calling them a Nazi, and starts doing everything they can to take him off the internet, to take off, to erase a thought, to do whatever they can to cancel them. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on a ramble there. The reason why, back to this, the reason why I am bringing up the Holocaust with the First Amendment is because, along with the Jews, there was artists, poets, authors who were deemed a threat to the ruling party of the Nazis. I wish I could give you a few examples. Sadly, on my part, I cannot. The Soviet dissidents of the USSR also yearned for freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of expression. This comes from Wikipedia. Soviet dissidents. In the 1950s, Soviet dissidents started leaking criticism to the West by sending documents and statements to foreign diplomatic missions in Moscow. In the 60s, Soviet dissidents frequently declared that the rights of the government of the Soviet Union denied them were universal rights, possessed by everyone regardless of race, religion, and nationality. In August 1969, for instance, the initiating group of Defense of Civil Rights in the USSR appealed to the United Nations Committee on Human Rights to defend the human rights being trampled on by the Soviet authorities in a number of trials. Some of the major milestones of the dissidents movement of the 1960s included public readings of poetry at the Mayakovsky Square in downtown Moscow, where some of the underground writings critical of the system were often circulated. Some of these public readings were dispersed by the police. The trial of poet Iosif Brodsky, later known as Joseph Brodsky, the future winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature, who was charged with parasitism for not being officially employed and sentenced in 1963 to internal exile. He gained widespread sympathy and support in dissident and semi-dissident circles, mostly through the notes from his trial compiled by Frida Vigorova. The trial and sentencing of writers Andrei Sinyavsky and Yuli Daniel, who were arrested in 1965 for publishing their co-authored work abroad under pen names, and sentenced to labor camp and internal exile. Opposition to this trial led to a campaign of petitions for their release that was signed by thousands of people, many of whom went on to participate more actively in the dissident movement. Silent demonstrations on Moscow's Pushkin Square, initiated by Alexander Yasenin Volpin on the Soviet Constitutional Day of December 5th, 1965, with posters urging authorities to observe their own constitution. Petitioning campaigns against the downplaying of Stalin's terror after the removal of Nikita Khrushchev and the resurgence of the cult of Stalin's personality in parts of the Soviet government bureaucracy. Let me pause right there. May I remind you that Stalin had more Soviet citizens executed, sent to gulags, disappear, and tortured than Nazi Germany did. I am not endorsing either or. Both governments were evil. Both governments were terribly, terribly wrong to even exist. I continue. The launch in April 1968 of the underground periodical Chronicle of Current Events, documenting violations of human rights and protest activities across the Soviet Union. The publication in the West of Andrei Sakharov's first political essay, Reflections on Progress and Intellectual Freedom, in the spring and summer of 1968. The rally of protest against the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia to suppress the Prague Spring was held on August 25, 1968, on Moscow's Red Square by 8 dissidents, including Viktor Feinberg, Natalia Gorban, I can't even pronounce her name, and Pav, can't even pronounce his name, and others. The founding of the Initiative on Human Rights in 1969, the 70s, the 80s, and even today, Putin is punishing anyone who has a free thought against the state government, against his new Russia, against the war in the Ukraine, which shouldn't even exist, but we have Putin, a gentleman who yearns for the days of Soviet Russia, when free thought could be stomped out by a simple knock on the door. In China, from the state.gov Human Rights Report, disappearance. There were multiple can't even talk tonight. There were multiple reports authorities disappeared individuals and held them at undisclosed locations for extended periods. The government conducted mass arbitrary detention of Yogi, can't pronounce that word either, and Kazakhs, and members of other Muslim and ethnic minority groups in the Xinjiang, can't pronounce that city either, so please forgive me. If you want to look this up, it's at state.gov Human Rights Report. China human rights defenders alleged these detentions amounted to enforced disappearances, since families were often not provided information about the length or the location of the detention. The exact whereabouts of Ekpar Asset, also known, I can't pronounce his name either, journalist and entrepreneur, remained unknown. He was reportedly detained in unpronounceable city in 2016 after participating in a program in the United States, and subsequently sentenced up to 15 years in prison. Authorities in Wuhan, that city sounds familiar, disappeared 4 citizen journalists who had interviewed healthcare professionals and citizens and later publicized their accounts on social media in the midst of the COVID 19 outbreak and subsequent lockdowns in Wuhan. Well, one reporter was released in April. Fang Bin's and Shin, can't pronounce that person's name either, forgive me. Whereabouts were unknown at the year's end. Zhang Zhen was indicted on charges of picking quarrels and provoking trouble, and authorities tried and convicted her on December 28th, sentencing her to 4 years imprisonment. She was the first known person to be tried and convicted for coverage of the COVID-19 outbreak in Wuhan. Human rights lawyer Gal can't pronounce this person's name either. I have to work on this. Who has been disappeared on multiple occasions, has been missing since 2017. The government still had not provided a comprehensive, credible accounting of all those killed, missing, or detained in connection with the violent suppression of the 1989 Tiananmen demonstrations. That name again, Tiananmen. What is, I know, Tiananmen Square. Many activists who were involved in the 1989 demonstrations and their family members continued to suffer official harassment. This was put together in 2020. At the bottom of the page, it says, Country Reports on Human Rights Practices for 2020, United States Department of State, Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. So for over 20 years, those activists who took part in the Tiananmen Square demonstrations have been missing. Their families have been missing. And this, again, goes back to the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the right to question your own government, the right to say this is not right and I would like my government to stop. Maybe not in those exact words, but you do have a right to address your government as far as why it's doing things. It's your right to question your government. It's your right of freedom of speech. Even in Cambodia, Cambodian People's Party. And I hope I get this right. From justsecurity.org, Cambodian rights activists and 55 others face trial as crackdown on dissent intensifies. Theory Sang, a Cambodian lawyer and human rights activist, is facing treason charges in a trial scheduled for November 26th for speaking critically against the Cambodian government and supporting democratic reform. The charges are part of a larger crackdown on activists and journalists viewed as opponents to the ruling Cambodian People's Party and Prime Minister Hun Sen. Sang, who is a refugee who, after earning her law degree at the University of Michigan, chose to return to Cambodia in 2004 to support the development of her country's democracy. She is the founder of the Cambodian Center for Justice and Reconciliation and the founding director of Civicus, Center for Cambodian Civic Education. For more than 10 years, her organizations have worked to educate Cambodians in democratic principles and the civics of Cambodian political system. The criminal charges and most recent sign that democratic institutions in Cambodia are deteriorating rapidly. Han Xin, I hope I got her name right, has been his name or whatever, has been prime minister for more than 35 years and has revealed a willingness to keep his seat by any means necessary. Numerous journalists have been imprisoned since the contested election in 2017 under the country's criminal incitement law, which allows the state to fine and imprison its detractors. Again, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of expression are most sacred and most holy of all amendments next to the Second Amendment. There is a political party who would love to use jackboot and brown shirt methods to silence you, to silence me, to silence anyone who may have a voice, whether they're peaceful or not. Me, I would prefer everything to be peaceful, but there are people who would not. Now, why am I bringing this up? Why am I even talking about this? Why am I talking about the First Amendment? Because from the Political Insider, dated November 29th, 2022, by Rusty Rice. Elon Musk announced he will make internal files on Twitter's suppression of free speech available to the public, prompting speculation of revelations into how the social media giant censored stories related to Hunter Biden's laptop prior to the 2020 presidential election. And I quote, "The Twitter files on free speech suppression, soon to be published on Twitter itself," Musk wrote in a non-specific Monday afternoon tweet. "The public deserves to know what really happened." The message led the New York Post to openly wonder if the release of such files would open eyes to what happened behind the scenes when their bombshell story regarding the president's son was blocked by Twitter. Last week, a user asked followers their thoughts on whether Musk should make public all internal discussions about the decision to censor the Post's story on Hunter Biden's laptop before the 2020 election in the interest of transparency. Musk replied that such a move would be necessary to restore public trust. Elon Musk threatens to release internal Twitter files. Elon Musk expanded on the notion that he would produce internal Twitter files related to the suppression of information to the public, hinting that they would be published on the very platform that they allegedly engaged in censorship. Part of the potential disclosure is likely to include the full story of Twitter's censorship of the posts reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop in the weeks before the 2020 presidential election. The Post writes, other revelations might include internal discussions on banning former President Donald Trump from the platform on general conversations amongst staff on decisions involving the banning of numerous right-leaning accounts. It may also reveal how the why on let me back up. It may also reveal how and why users were banned or suspended for speaking out against the COVID-19 vaccines or efforts to stop the spread. In the follow-up tweet, Musk pushed the importance of making the files public. It is a fight for public knowledge he takes quite seriously. This is a battle for the future of civilization, he wrote in a now pinned tweet. If free speech is lost, even in America, tyranny is all that lies ahead. Conservatives celebrate Musk's move. Conservative users were chomping at the bit following Musk's announcement. Unleash hell, wrote the Columbia Bugle. Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Bobbitt replied, let's get it all out there. Several other users tweeted GIFs or emojis suggesting they were getting the popcorn ready. A glimpse at the internal workings of a social media company. It is their contention could prove once and for all that conservative free speech in America was stifled. Prior to purchasing the platform, Musk condemned Twitter's censorship of the Hunter Biden laptop story as obviously inappropriate. Beyond inappropriate, it actually swayed an election. Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Meta, admitted during a podcast with host Joe Rogan in August that Facebook had algorithmically throttled the reach of any posts involving the Hunter laptop scandal following a visit from the FBI. I know this because I posted a meme about Hunter Biden and the laptop, and I got punished. I got silenced for 3 days. I was told I was a bad Facebook user. And repeatedly, I was fact-checked for posting opinions, for posting memes, for posting jokes. They were all censored. Zuckerberg said they were not specifically instructed by the FBI to focus on the Hunter Biden story, but the company apparently did so anyways because it basically fit the pattern mentioned in the visit. Did the FBI make similar outreach efforts to Twitter? Did people in Biden's campaign? Zuckerberg admitted to throttling the reach of the Biden story, while Twitter blocked it altogether and suspended accounts if they repeatedly tried to share the information. Last month, a conservative legal group filed a lawsuit in federal court against the FBI after they failed to turn over communications between the Bureau and the big tech companies related to the alleged efforts to censor the laptop story. Twitter was also the focus of an explosive Times Magazine investigation piece titled The Secret History of the Shadow Campaign That Saved the 2020 Election. The story focused on a scenario involving a well-funded cabal of powerful people who worked in concert to change election laws and control the dissemination of information before and after the election. I cannot talk tonight at all. Please forgive me. Will this Twitter cabal finally be revealed with Elon Musk's release of their internal files? The Time column reference a little-known effort by a veteran progressive operative to combat disinformation on social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter. In November 2019, Mark Zuckerberg invited 9 civil rights leaders to dinner at his home, where they warned him about the danger of election-related falsehoods and they were already spreading unchecked, the column reveals. Vanita Gupta, who was later nominated for Associate Attorney General by President Biden, attended the dinner and also met with Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. Gupta conveyed the pressure those in attendance placed on the big tech titans. It took pushing, urging, conversations, brainstorming, all of that to get to a place where we ended up with more rigorous rules and enforcement, she said. The social media companies would eventually ban or suppress the reach of accounts, making suggestions that there were integrity issues concerning in the 2020 election. And you wonder why the battle for free speech is going on, why it's on all the news, why Elon Musk is being referred to as the most hated man in America by all news outlets. Who had something to gain with Biden winning? Who had something to gain with censorship of thought, of freedom of speech? There were plenty of us on Facebook, on social media, that were repeatedly fact-checked and scolded by the algorithms. You were a bad boy. You're going to be put in timeout. Censorship is not right. Whether it be religious, political, or thought. My friends, my neighbors, the right to free speech has always been here in America since the 1700s. The right to express your displeasure against your government is a right that has been earned in the bloodshed of every American soldier, of every American sailor, Marine, airman. We have bled for ground, inch by inch, overseas for people's rights. Right to live, right to breathe, right to speak. We have not always been right at times. We have not always been the best of a country, but we have learned. And we have earned the right for freedom of speech. Whether you like Brandon or not, whether you like Trump or not, it is your right to express your displeasure. It is also your right to not have to listen. And that is why on social media you have this little thing called the block button, where you can block someone's post. You don't have to sit there and listen to them. You don't have to sit there and read what they have to say. All you gotta do is block. It's not the end of the world. Your world is not going to end in a gigantic boom because you saw something someone did not agree with you with, or you didn't agree with something someone said. We have to get over this hatred we have for each other. We have to get over being so jittered by someone's opposite opinion of ours, whether it be religious or political. My friends, I did not intend to get so ranting on this topic tonight. But being a veteran of 13 years, I have earned the right to freedom of speech, whether you agree with it or not. I have earned that right. And so has every other veteran. And yes, civilians have that right too. You have a right to sit on a corner, hold a sandwich board, and say your God is great and ring that bell. You have a right to make your voice heard. And that's one great thing about these content channels. Yes, sometimes they can be headaches, they can be irritating, they can be frustrating. But it gives you an outlet. It gives you a right to express yourself, whether you agree with a person or not. For those who want to silence a voice because they do not agree with it, that isn't right. There are people on the political aisles, well, one political aisle, who say if you support freedom of speech, you protect fascism. You support evil because you're encouraging freedom of speech. I've seen tweets and posts from people saying that if you support freedom of speech, you support hatred. You support hate speech. For those people, I don't know what to say. I don't know. Maybe they've never been outside this country. Maybe they've never experienced a country or a civilization where you can go to jail for saying the wrong thing. Um, for those who support the thought of a gulag, for anyone who has a political thought different from yours, I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Nothing anyone is going to say is going to change your mind until you see your mistake. My friends, I didn't mean to get this long. I didn't mean to turn this into a long rant. For those of you who stayed with this piece of content, for those who have listened to me going on my rant, I thank you. I don't know where this channel is going to go. I sure didn't mean for it to. When I had a thought of starting a YouTube channel, I wanted to do reviews of food. I wanted to talk about food. I wanted to talk about military rations. I wanted to talk about long-term food. Something clicked in me where I said, I have to speak out. I have to have a voice. Whether it's heard or not, who knows? But I have a link for buying me a cup of coffee. I'd appreciate it. Hit that like button, subscribe, share the video. I'm slowly learning how to make my content better. And so far, almost 100 people have seen my videos. That kind of made me smile. Now, I don't know if they agree with them or not, but it kind of makes me smile that just 100 people. That feels good. Now I know what the other content creators talk about when they see those viewer counts tick. When 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, 400 people, when 1,000 people see their pieces of content, now I know how that feels. So for those who are watching, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And again, I didn't mean for this to be so long, but thank you for sticking around. It means a lot to me. It means the world to me that someone is listening to me. So, anyways, America, have a good night. Be safe. For those of you who don't agree with me, the same to you. Have a good night and be safe. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Good night, America.